My name is Lila Thompson. I live in a quiet suburb of Denver, Colorado. I'm 31 years old, married for 7 years, and for a long time, I believed my life was stable, safe, even predictable. From the outside, it probably looked ideal. But inside my own home, something far more calculated was happening. Derek controlled everything. Not loudly, not violently. But quietly, systematically, with a smile. He handled all our finances. Every account was under his name. My debit card had a weekly limit, he said himself. If I needed money for groceries, clothes, or even a gift for my sister, I had to explain why. Receipts were checked. Questions followed. Sometimes jokes. Sometimes sighs. Always judgment. "You're not good with money," he'd say casually. "I just don't want you stressing yourself," he'd add, as if concern justified permission. At first, I believed him. Then there was my schedule. Derek liked to know where I was at all times, not by force, but by expectation. "Where are you going? How long will that take? Who's going to be there?" If I hesitated, he noticed. If I changed plans, he questioned it. The questions were always calm. Almost casual. But they came with an unspoken rule: there was a right answer, and I was expected to know it. His tone never shifted, but something else did: the air in the room, the silence that followed. Slowly, I learned that it was easier to stay home than to explain myself. But the moment that cracked everything happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. I had received an invitation to a local professional networking event: marketing, small business owners, freelancers. I had worked in communications before marriage, something Derek loved to mock as a hobby. Still, I showed him the email, hopeful. He barely glanced at it. "Why would you go to that?" he laughed. "You don't need a career. You need to be realistic." Then he said it. "Just stay home and be useful." He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't apologize. And that was the moment I finally understood: this wasn't protection. This wasn't care. This was control, polished, disguised, and normalized over years. If you're enjoying the story so far, feel free to like the video and subscribe for future chapters. And let me know in the comments, I'd love to know where you're watching from. That night, I lay awake replaying conversations I had dismissed before. The corrections. The jokes at my expense. The way my ambitions were always framed as impractical, unnecessary, or selfish. I thought of my bank account, technically mine, but monitored. My time, technically free, but supervised. My confidence, slowly dismantled, piece by piece. For the first time, fear wasn't the strongest emotion I felt. Anger was. But not explosive anger. Not reckless anger. Focused anger. I didn't confront Derek. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I did something far more dangerous. I observed. I started paying attention to his routines: when he left for work, when he checked statements, when he ignored notifications. I noticed how confident he was in his control. How certain he felt that I would never step outside the boundaries he had built. That confidence was his weakness. Within days, I made my first decision: not a dramatic one, not a visible one. A quiet one. I reopened my old laptop, the one Derek never used. I created a new email address under my middle name. No personal photos. No shared devices. No saved passwords. Then I opened an account on a freelance platform. Not impulsively. Not blindly. I chose social media management, something Derek had always dismissed as scrolling online. Something I knew how to do. Something that could be done quietly, from home, without raising alarms. This wasn't revenge yet. This was preparation. And Derek had no idea that the woman he thought was powerless had just taken her first real step toward freedom. The first thing I learned was this: I couldn't rush. Rushing would leave traces. Traces would raise questions. Questions would give Derek power. So I moved slowly. Every morning after Derek left for work, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee. Not hiding. Not rushing. Just existing the way he was used to seeing me exist. Except this time, I wasn't scrolling aimlessly. I finished setting up my freelance profile carefully. No real photo. No personal details. Just skills and experience. Social media content planning. Basic analytics. Caption writing. Scheduling posts. Things I had done years ago but was told never mattered. I spent days studying other profiles. How they wrote. How they priced. What kind of clients they attracted. When I finally applied to my first job, my hands were steady. It was a small local business. A family-owned cafe looking for someone to manage their Instagram page 3 posts a week. Stories on weekends. $150 a month. Not impressive. Not dramatic. But it was real. When the message came back. We'd like to work with you. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. It wasn't excitement that hit me first. It was disbelief. I hadn't asked permission. I hadn't explained myself. And the world hadn't collapsed. The first payment arrived a week later. $150. I transferred it immediately. Not to any account Derek knew. I had opened a digital bank account under my middle name. Paperless. No mail. No shared notifications. When the confirmation screen appeared, something inside me shifted. Not loudly. Not emotionally. Solidly. That night, Derek mentioned money at dinner. He always did. He liked reminding me who was in charge. Expenses were higher this week, he said casually. We'll need to be more careful. I nodded. Soft. Agreeable. Inside, I was calm. He didn't know that for the first time in years. I had money he couldn't see. Money he couldn't question. Money he couldn't take. The cafe account grew slowly. The owner was happy. Engagement increased. Followers went up. They recommended me to a friend. A small clothing boutique. $200 a month. Then a local fitness studio. $300. Each client was separate. Each payment went into the same hidden account. Each invoice saved. Each message archived. I kept a spreadsheet. Dates. Amounts. Client names. Platforms. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I wanted proof. One evening, Derek came home earlier than usual. I was at the table. Laptop open. Scheduling posts. My heart didn't race. I didn't slam the screen shut. That was the difference now. He leaned against the counter and watched me. What are you doing? He asked. I didn't panic. I didn't lie loudly. I'm helping a small business with their Instagram. He laughed. Shook his head. People really pay for that nonsense. Yes, I said quietly. They do. He didn't press further. To him, it was insignificant. Embarrassing, even. And that was when I understood something clearly. His arrogance was protecting me better than secrecy ever could. By the end of the second month, my hidden income passed $1,000. Not enough to leave. Not enough to fight. But enough to know I was no longer trapped. Enough to know I wasn't trapped. Enough to know that if I continued. Slowly. Methodically. This would turn into something he could never undo. And for the first time. I wasn't waiting to be saved. I was building my exit with my own hands. The work became routine in the best possible way. Morning coffee. Laptop open. Content scheduled. Messages answered. Nothing dramatic. Nothing suspicious. That was the power of it. I learned how to batch posts, how to automate replies, how to schedule an entire week of content in under an hour. The more efficient I became, the less visible the work was. Derek saw the same woman at the same table, at the same time, doing what he assumed was nothing important. By the third month, I raised my prices. Not impulsively. Strategically. New clients paid more. Old clients stayed. One of them changed everything. A regional skincare brand reached out after seeing my work on a boutique's page. They wanted full account management. Daily posts. Campaign planning. Analytics reports. A 3-month contract. $800 a month. I read the message twice before replying. Then I waited an hour. I didn't want excitement to make me careless. When the contract was signed, I printed it and added it to my folder. Not hidden in panic. Organized. Labeled. Proof of income. Proof of capability. Proof that I was no longer dependent. The payments came in regularly. Clean. Predictable. My account crossed $5,000. That number mattered. Not because it was huge, but because it meant I had options. Derek started noticing changes around then. Not the money. Me. I spoke differently. Not louder, not challenging, just certain. I no longer hesitated before answering simple questions. I no longer over-explained. "You've been on your laptop a lot lately," he said one evening, pretending it was casual. "Yes," I replied. "I've been busy." Busy with what? Work. The word hung between us longer than I expected. He frowned slightly. "You mean that social media thing?" "Yes." He shrugged, but his eyes stayed on me a moment too long. Later that week, my phone buzzed while we were sitting on the couch. A payment notification. I picked it up immediately, calm but precise, and turned the screen away as I stood. "Who was that?" he asked. "A client," I said. They had a question. He didn't respond, but the silence was heavier than before. From that moment on, I adjusted again. I moved notifications. I scheduled payments during hours he wasn't home. I routed client calls through headphones. Not out of fear, but discipline. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was managing exposure. At night, when he slept, I researched more. Business structures. Tax basics. Independent accounts. Emergency funds. I wasn't just earning. I was learning how not to be vulnerable again. I also began saving documents. Marriage papers. Identification. Contracts. Copies stored digitally and physically. Not because I planned to run. Because I planned to choose. One afternoon, Derek glanced at the bank statements and frowned. "Some things look different," he said slowly. "Not wrong. Just different." I met his eyes without flinching. "Then we should review them together," I said. It was the first time I had ever said that. He didn't argue. He didn't insist. He nodded. That was new. The power shift was subtle, but real. By the end of the 4th month, I had steady clients, growing confidence, and money that belonged to me alone. Derek still believed he controlled the structure of our life. What he didn't realize was that structures collapse when the foundation quietly changes. And mine already had. By the time Derek began asking more questions, I was already several steps ahead. I didn't change my routine dramatically. I changed it deliberately. Small adjustments that looked natural from the outside but created space on the inside. I began leaving the house alone once a week. Nothing dramatic. A coffee. A walk. A quiet place with reliable internet. Derek noticed, of course. "Where are you going?" "To clear my head," I said. "Work better when I'm not distracted." He didn't like it, but he didn't forbid it. He still believed I was operating within limits he had defined. That assumption was no longer true. During those hours away, I met people again. Not secretly. Selectively. Former colleagues. A friend from years ago who now worked in digital marketing. Conversations that reminded me how much of myself I had been asked to shrink. I also spoke to a financial consultant. Not about divorce. Not about confrontation. About independence. About separating assets. About understanding my rights. I took notes. I asked questions. I didn't act yet. Preparation was the action. At home, I began setting boundaries in ways that couldn't be argued against. Simple statements. Calm delivery. I'll handle that myself. I've already decided. I don't need help with this. Derek reacted with confusion more than anger. He wasn't used to resistance that didn't invite conflict. One evening, he reached for my laptop without asking. Instinctively. Automatically. I closed it. Please don't do that, I said evenly. He froze. Looked at me. Really looked. I'm just checking something, he replied. I know, I said. And I don't want you to. The silence that followed was unfamiliar. He didn't push. He stepped back. That night, I documented the moment. Not emotionally. Factually. Date. Time. What was said. How he reacted. I wasn't building a case out of bitterness. I was building clarity. My income continued to grow. Not explosively. Reliably. Clients renewed contracts. One referred another. I raised my rates again. By the 6th month, I could support myself. That knowledge changed how I stood. How I spoke. How I breathed. Derek sensed it. His comments became less dismissive and more probing. You're acting like you don't need me, he said once, half joking. I don't need control, I replied. I need respect. He didn't laugh. I also began preparing for visibility. Not exposure. Visibility on my terms. I updated my resume. I created a professional profile under my real name. I didn't publish it yet. I just wanted it ready. Every document was organized. Every account secured. Every password changed. One afternoon, Derek asked something that told me he felt the shift. If you had to, could you manage on your own? I looked at him calmly. Yes, I said. Not defiantly. Not emotionally. Honestly. He didn't respond. That was the moment I knew. The balance had already changed. He just hadn't accepted it yet. And acceptance, I had learned, is not required for independence. I didn't choose the moment out of anger. I chose it because everything was ready. The accounts were secure. The contracts were signed. The documents were organized. And most importantly, I no longer felt afraid. That morning felt ordinary. Coffee. Light through the window. Derek reading something on his phone. Nothing dramatic on the surface. After breakfast, I asked him to sit with me in the living room. We need to talk, I said. He looked surprised, but he sat. I placed a folder on the table between us. Not thrown. Not slammed. Just set down carefully. Inside were copies of my contracts, payment records, invoices, and bank statements from my independent account. Clean. Organized. Undeniable. I've been working for months, I said calmly. I manage social media accounts for several businesses. This is my income. He flipped through the pages slowly. His face didn't change at first. Then his breathing did. How long, he asked. 6 months. You did all of this without telling me. Yes. Why? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. Because every time I tried to grow, you minimized it. Controlled it. Or dismissed it. I needed to know who I was without your permission. He leaned back, silent. I'm financially independent, I continued. I pay my own expenses. I have my own savings. I'm no longer dependent on you. The word hung there. Independent. This isn't revenge, I said. It's reality. For the first time, Derek didn't interrupt me. Didn't correct me. Didn't explain me to myself. You took control without asking, he said finally. I nodded. Yes. The way you always did. The silence that followed wasn't explosive. It was heavy. Final. I'm not leaving today, I said. But things will not continue the way they were. My money is mine. My time is mine. My decisions are mine. He didn't argue. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. That evening, the house felt different. Quieter. Wider. I sat at my desk and worked like I always did. Answered messages. Scheduled posts. Sent invoices. Nothing about my life stopped. But everything about it had changed. The days after that conversation were not dramatic. They were revealing. Derek didn't explode. He didn't apologize either. He became careful in a way that told me everything I needed to know. He watched more. Spoke less. Asked questions that circled instead of confronting. I noticed the shift immediately. When I paid for groceries with my own card, he hesitated before commenting. When I mentioned a client call, he didn't laugh it off. When I left the house with my laptop, he didn't ask how long I'd be gone. Control, once broken, doesn't disappear overnight. It adapts. And Derek was adapting. So was I. I began operating openly, but not recklessly. I updated my schedule on my terms. I told him when I would be unavailable instead of asking. I moved one of my workdays to a shared co-working space downtown. Not hidden. Stated. This helps me focus, I said. He didn't argue. He couldn't. There was nothing unreasonable about it. My income continued to grow, but now I allowed it to be visible. Not all of it. Just enough. I paid for utilities. Covered a weekend trip. Booked a professional course without discussion. Each action wasn't a challenge. It was a fact. One evening, Derek tried to reassert himself. It was subtle. You don't have to do everything alone, he said. We're a team. I looked at him carefully before answering. A team doesn't require permission, I said. It requires trust. That was the first time I saw uncertainty replace confidence in his eyes. I also noticed something else. The more independent I became, the less interested he seemed in managing me. Control had been his comfort. Without it, he seemed unsure of his role. I didn't fill that space for him. Instead, I expanded my life. I took on a national brand as a client. Negotiated my rate myself. Signed the contract myself. When the first payment arrived, I didn't hide it. I logged it. Documented it. Moved part of it into long-term savings. I also spoke to a lawyer. Quietly. Informationally. No threats. No ultimatums. Just understanding options. Knowledge changes posture. I felt it in my body before I felt it in my thoughts. At home, Derek grew quieter. Less dismissive. More observant. One night, he said something that made the shift undeniable. I didn't think you could do this, he admitted. Not proudly. Not kindly. Honestly. I nodded. Neither did you. And that was the truth he couldn't escape. From that moment on, the marriage wasn't a cage anymore. It was a choice. And choices can be reevaluated. I didn't announce anything. I didn't threaten to leave. I didn't demand change. I simply lived as someone who could. Weeks passed. Then months. Derek stopped monitoring accounts. Stopped commenting on my time. Stopped assuming authority. Not because he had changed fundamentally, but because the structure that supported his control no longer existed. The power shift wasn't loud. It was permanent. One afternoon, while sitting at the same kitchen table where all of this had begun, I realized something quietly. I wasn't waiting for a final moment anymore. I had already won. The first real test came unexpectedly. One afternoon, Derek told me he had reviewed our shared accounts again. His tone was casual, but his timing wasn't. There are patterns, he said. Gaps. Money that used to be there isn't. I didn't react immediately. I finished what I was doing, closed my laptop, and sat across from him. That's because I no longer move my income through those accounts, I said. He frowned. All income should be transparent. My income is, I replied. Just not shared. The difference between those two statements landed heavily. He leaned back, studying me like he was trying to recognize a stranger. You're changing the rules, he said. No, I answered. I'm using them. That conversation didn't escalate. It couldn't. Everything I said was reasonable. Everything he wanted to argue belonged to the past version of me. After that, he began testing boundaries more deliberately. Small questions. Strategic comments. Subtle guilt. Do you even need this marriage anymore? He asked one night, half joking. I need respect, I said. Everything else is negotiable. He didn't respond. Around that time, my work took another turn. One of my clients asked if I could help build a full digital strategy for a product launch. It meant more money. More responsibility. More visibility. I accepted. The work demanded focus, and for the first time, I didn't adjust my life around Derek's expectations. I adjusted my schedule around my goals. I came home late some evenings. Not secretly. Intentionally. You didn't tell me you'd be out this long, he said once. I told you I had meetings, I replied. I didn't ask how long I was allowed to have them. That silence again. Heavy. Familiar now. At night, I noticed something else. Derek stopped mocking my work. Stopped dismissing it. He asked practical questions instead. Not supportive. Curious. How much does a contract like that pay? I looked at him. Considered. Then answered. Enough. That answer frustrated him more than any number would have. Meanwhile, I made another quiet move. I opened a separate long-term account. Not for escape. For leverage. Independence doesn't announce itself. It prepares. I also updated my personal network. Reconnected with people openly now. No excuses. No explanations. Each message I sent felt lighter than the last. One evening, Derek said something that revealed how deeply the shift had affected him. You don't look at me the same anymore. I didn't deny it. I see more clearly now, I said. That was the closest we came to honesty in years. And still, I didn't rush the ending. Because power doesn't need to hurry. It waits until the moment when it no longer needs permission to exist. The crisis didn't arrive with shouting. It arrived with exposure. One evening, Derek came home earlier than usual. I was in the living room, laptop open, papers spread across the table. I wasn't hiding anything. I didn't need to. He stood there longer than necessary, watching. You're busy lately, he said. Yes, I replied without looking up. He walked closer and noticed the documents. Contracts. Timelines. Numbers that were no longer small. What is all this? He asked. My work, I said calmly. He picked one paper up before I could stop him. Not aggressively. Automatically. The way someone touches something they believe belongs to them. I closed my laptop. Put it down, I said. That was new. The tone. Not angry. Final. He hesitated, then placed the paper back on the table. But something had already shifted. This affects both of us, he said. I should know what you're planning. I met his eyes. I'm not planning, I said. I'm building. His jaw tightened. You're shutting me out. No, I replied. You just don't have access anymore. That was the moment his patience broke. So what now, he asked. You just do whatever you want and I'm supposed to smile. I stood up slowly. Not defensively. Deliberately. What you're reacting to, I said, is the absence of control. Not the presence of disrespect. His voice dropped. Dangerous, not loud. You think you're untouchable now. I didn't flinch. I think I'm prepared, I said. The room went quiet in a way that felt heavy, not peaceful. He walked away, pacing, running his hands through his hair like someone trying to think their way back into power. You changed, he said finally. Yes, I answered. And you noticed too late. That night, he slept in the guest room. Not as a punishment. As a retreat. The next morning, he tried a different approach. Apologies wrapped in reason. Concern disguised as care. I just want us to be aligned, he said over coffee. We are, I replied. Just not under your terms. Later that day, something happened that confirmed the crisis wasn't emotional anymore. It was strategic. I received an email from my bank. A routine alert. A failed authorization attempt on one of my private accounts. Someone had tried to access it. Not successfully. But deliberately. I didn't confront him. Not yet. That evening, Derek mentioned finances casually. Too casually. Maybe we should simplify things again, he said. Shared structure worked before. I looked at him and realized something very clearly. This wasn't about money. It was about losing the ability to decide for me. And in that moment, I understood that the real danger wasn't confrontation. It was timing. Because once someone realizes they no longer control you, they either adapt. Or they try one last move. The final moment didn't come the way Derek expected. There was no argument. No dramatic confrontation. No packed bags waiting by the door. No raised voices trying to win the last word. Instead, it came on an ordinary morning. The kind of morning that looks exactly like every other one, until you realize later that it changed everything. I woke up before him, as I had many times before, but this time my thoughts were clear and settled. Not emotional. Not rushed. There was no fear sitting in my chest, no tightness in my shoulders. Just certainty. Quiet, steady certainty. I made coffee slowly. I stood by the window for a moment, watching the city wake up, realizing how long I had been awake in this life without ever really standing in it. Then I reviewed one last document on my phone and sent a short email. Just 3 words. Proceed as discussed. By the time Derek walked into the kitchen, everything was already in motion. Not dramatically. Not visibly. But irreversibly. He noticed the calm first. The absence of tension. People often mistake silence for weakness. He did too. You're up early, he said. Yes, I replied. I have a full day. He nodded, hesitated, then finally asked the question he had been circling for weeks, the one he was afraid to hear answered honestly. Are you leaving? I looked at him. Really looked at him. And in that moment, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness either. I just saw him clearly. I saw how much of his confidence had always been built on my hesitation. How much of his strength depended on my silence? No, I said. I'm finishing. That confused him more than any argument ever could. Later that afternoon, I met with my lawyer in person. Not to react. Not to defend myself. But to conclude. Every step had been prepared quietly, patiently, and legally. There were no emotional decisions left to make. Only clear ones. There were no surprises for me anymore. Only for him. That evening, when Derek came home, he found an envelope on the table. Not hidden. Not dramatic. Clearly placed, exactly where he would see it. Inside were copies. Financial separations. Documentation of independent income. A formal notice of restructuring our shared assets. Every page calm. Every sentence precise. Everything clean. Everything defensible. Everything irreversible. He read slowly, as if moving too fast might undo what was written there. You planned this, he said. Yes, I answered. For a long time. His voice softened then. Not with regret. Not with apology. But with realization. You never needed me, he said. I shook my head gently. I needed peace, I replied. You made sure I didn't have it. That was the first honest sentence between us in years. He tried once more to reframe it. Partnership. History. Shared time. Familiar arguments that once would have made me question myself, doubt my worth, or shrink back into comfort. But doubt requires imbalance. And there was none left. I'm not angry, I told him. I'm done negotiating my existence. He didn't fight after that. There was nothing left to fight with. Control only works when someone believes it belongs to you. And I no longer did. The weeks that followed were quiet. Not empty. Just peaceful. There was no public drama. No social media statements. No spectacle designed to prove anything to anyone. Just distance. Boundaries. Finality. My work expanded naturally. My name began to circulate independently of his. People didn't introduce me as someone's wife anymore. They introduced me as someone who knew exactly what she was doing. And every time that happened, I felt a small, steady sense of pride. Not loud. Not performative. Real. One afternoon, months later, I ran into Derek by chance. He looked tired. Not broken. Just smaller. Like someone who had finally met himself without someone else carrying the weight. You look different, he said. So do you, I replied. As I walked away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not victory. Not satisfaction. Relief. Because the best revenge isn't destruction. It's independence so complete that the past no longer has access to you. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't surviving a role someone else wrote for me. I was living a life I chose. Have you ever realized you were disappearing too slowly to notice? If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you were slowly disappearing in someone else's shadow, know this: clarity always comes quietly, but it changes everything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know how far this story reached. Thank you all for listening.